Okay, so we're now getting to the part of the shir that's a little bit more exciting than the previous part, which is not that the Gemara necessarily is more exciting, but the concept of how to keep the children engaged. I know when my kids came home with nuts, it didn't look like the most exciting thing in the world, and it didn't look like that was really going to entice them to stay up during the Seder. But now we're going to get to some aspect that does seem like a little bit more exciting and a little bit more engaging, and we'll discuss. Before we start, there was something I neglected to mention that I had asked about in Chavruta last time. So I want to just point out how you would find the halacha. Okay, so I said, where would you find the halacha? So there's something on the side called the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, and there's little letters in the Gemara. So for example, I'm now on the other page, but we'll start here. Let's say I wanted to know the halacha for chotfin matzot. So there's a little aleph here, if you could see on the screen. And that aleph takes you to here. And there's an aleph and a bet there. And there it tells you where you can find it in the Rambam. Okay, you have to learn how to use these. But for example, it says here, tet vav shin ayin. It's very small. I could try to make it even bigger. Let's see if I lost it now. Here. Okay. So it says tet vav shin ayin. That means Torah v'shulchan aruch aleph chet, which is orach chayim, siman taf ayin bet seif aleph. So if you wanted to find that halacha, that's where you would look. Okay, so the Gemara has all sorts of things on the page. Last week we saw where you would find where the pasuk comes from, which was kind of going back. This is going forward. If you want to know the halacha, you would find it there. Okay, now we're going to go back to our Gemara. Okay, so we're going to start with, just go down, make this a little bit smaller. Okay, we're going to start with Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer omer, chotfin matzot leilei psachim bishvil tinokot shelo yishnu. So we grab matzahs on the nights of Pesach. A few people asked this question, and we're going to really address it now, which is some things are done on Erev Pesach, some things are done on leilei psachim. What is Erev? What is leilei? So generally, and I say generally because we're going to see that there's a little bit of debate sometimes about how to understand these, but generally Erev means the afternoon before, and leilei means the night of. Okay, so someone had asked a question about why would we give the kids the nuts on Erev Pesach? It should be leilei psachim. So either you could say they really kind of meant one and the same, and maybe they really meant the night, or alternatively, you could say leilei, that arvei, they gave it to them in the afternoon so that they bring it to the Seder, which is a possibility. So now let's talk about this chotfim matzot. Chotfim matzot, as you can see, if you learned through the Chavruta, there's going to be 4 different suggestions. The Rashbam himself brings 3, and then we're going to see a 4th one in the Meiri, which is what exactly is going on here, who's grabbing what, and why, and what are we grabbing. So the Rashbam says, chotfin matzah, magbihim et ha'ka'ara. We lift up the plate. Bishvil tinokot sheyishalu. There's actually a different Gemara that talks about lifting up the plate. And if you all know, I know we always laugh at this at the Seder, right? The different books say different things. And okay, this one says, oh, now it says, okay, lift this, move that. Why are we doing all these things? And often they say, and one time I used to joke that anytime they're not sure why we do something at the Seder, they say it's so that the children should ask, right? It's like the easy answer. If you don't know the answer, you say, oh, it's so the children should ask. So they say, what's chotfim matzah? We lift the plate. Now, what does it have to do with matzah? Well, the assumption is the matzah was on the plate, right? You had the Seder plate and the matzahs were there. You lift them. So what this means is we do something strange so that it gets the kids to ask, wait, what's going on, right? Normally, you bring serving plates to the table and you don't take them off before people eat. That's a strange thing to do. So that's one option. Number 2, idim efarshe. Some people say, chotfim matzah means ochlim maher. Lachtof matzah, right? To grab. Sometimes you grab and you gobble it down very quickly. You eat very quickly. This is funny because, right? Why would you eat quickly? And this goes on also at many people's seders, right? There's the people who want to talk and talk and talk. And there's the people who say, hurry up, because we're going to lose everybody, right? We're going to lose our crowd. And that's what they say here. You got to eat quickly because you want the kids to stay awake through the end and therefore rush through the eating the matzah and I guess in general. So Shnei Lashonot halalu peresh Rabbeinu. So this is what our rabbi explained. V'yesh gorsim, some people have the girsa matzot, okay? Or if you notice here, it says chotfin matzah. In the Gemara, it actually said chotfin matzot. So if you say matzot, then it makes sense to say, and here we're going to see that depending on which word you had there, it affects what it might mean. Because if you say matzot, then it must be magvihim et haka'ara, because it has matzah, maror, shnei tavshilim, and it has matzot plural. So chotfim matzot is you take the matzahs that are on the table, you take them off. But it seems to me to say something else, which is chotfin misalkin et halechem. And by the way, just to clarify, matzah would be just to basically say, right, eat quickly, chotfim matzah. The matzah that you eat it quickly so that we can finish the meal quickly and we can get back to the Seder. But to me, it seems a third option. Chotfin misalkin et halechem miyad hatinokot shelo yuhu yeshenim mitoch ma'achal harbeh. This is very interesting, right? We all know that when you eat a lot, what happens? You get sleepy. So they say, don't take away, it's funny they call it lechem, they obviously mean the matzah, from the children so that they don't eat too much and they fall asleep early. Kederech hatinok achar chilato, right? Not just tinokot, right? Lots of us. After a big lunch, after Shabbos lunch, right? Everybody just crashes on the couch. Vishuv lo yishalu, and then what's going to happen? They're going to miss asking the questions. But if we grab it from them, grabbing means so that they don't have it. Right? And then they'll see we do all these strange things, and then they'll say, oh, why are you doing this? And then we'll answer. So chotfim. So we have three explanations. Either lift the plate up, or eat the matzah quickly, or take matzah away from the children so that they don't get sleepy. Now, this is not, other than lifting the plate, none of these really are something that we do generally. So now the Rashbam brings some proofs for what he says. He says, "V'chein muchach lashon Tosefta." Ditanya, it says in the Tosefta, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, chotfin matzah letinok kedei shelo yishan. So that seems to prove we take the matzah away from the children so that he doesn't sleep. I'm going to skip the next line. I'm going to go now. Right, he explains that it seems to be stealing, right? We take it away from them. And then he says, so now his second proof, he tries to prove the second, which is we eat the matzah quickly. He says, the fact that Rabbi Akiva, who closed the Beit Midrash early, which is the next part of the Gemara, he says, in other words, if the whole idea is we want to make sure they don't sleep, okay, because again, there's different issues here about if we don't want them to sleep, then it makes sense that we brought Rabbi Akiva, which is also another reason as to why they don't sleep. And then he says, and then, okay, so he says, if, right, right? So because it says Kadosh Shelo Yishan, that's why the next section of the Gemara talks about Kadosh Shelo Yishnu. Okay, then we're going to skip the end of what he says. And now I want to go to the fourth explanation. And the fourth explanation is very important because the fourth explanation matches what we do at our Seder, which is, at least many of us do. I know we do. I think many people do this, which is V'chein chotfim matzah, klomar. That we play a hide and seek game and we grab it and we hide it, right? Different people have different customs, whether one person steals it and hides it, or it kind of gets stolen from person to person. So here you see the Meiri, who's living in Provence in the 13th century. He basically explains that in his, right, this is what they're doing. This is like a game to get the kids super excited. You could see how, right? So either we're trying to prevent them from eating so they don't get too sleepy, or we're trying to rush through the food so they don't get too sleepy, or we lift the plate. But this is a much more engaging way to get the kids going. As we all know, everybody always talks about the afikomen. And then lo yavo l'idei shena, right? And then yit oreru, they'll be all excited. L'mashe ro'im, they'll be awake and aware of what's going on. And then they'll ask, and they'll really ask their questions until we start telling them the answers, right? Okay, fine. So that's the Meiri. So we have these four different explanations as to what they did. Now I want to show you what happened over history. And specifically, it's interesting to note that all the people I brought here are different opinions, and they're different people living in different places in different time periods. So the Orchot Chaim, living in Provence, which is not long after the Meiri in the same place, he says here, and now we're going to see all sorts of backlash about this custom. Okay, you think, right, Afikomen, everybody talks about it, and some people might be bothered by this Afikomen sometimes, and you're going to see that the commentaries were very bothered by it, and for different reasons, though. Hevim Sefer Moreh Or Shekatav Shaminhag Lignov Ha'afikoman Hu Badoy VeHevel. It's a made-up custom, and it's useless. And then, okay, he doesn't like this idea. And you notice how he calls it lignov. He doesn't like it. It looks like we're stealing. And then he further says, ubagoyim nishma, and the non-Jews are complaining. They say, shayudim melamdim yaldehem lignov zecher litzia mitzrayim v'yinatzlu. They say that what? If you remember, when we left Egypt, what did we do? We took the jewels of the Egyptians. So he says, look, the Goyim are complaining that we're teaching our children to steal just like the Jews stole them from the Egyptians. We all, right? This is classic anti-Semitism. And because of that, he said, we better stop this custom. Alken hamonea mishubach, right? Whoever stops doing this should be rewarded, okay, or praised. Okay, the next source is Chut HaShani. We're moving now to Germany, 17th century. He says, "She'ein isur b'chatifat ha'afikoman al yedei hatinokot shelo yishnu." Umavtichim lahem davar mu'at. Okay, he actually says there's nothing wrong with this. You can promise them a gift, right? Here we see already this concept that kids get a gift with the afikoman. But then he says, well, if you're close to bar mitzvah, you shouldn't be doing this anymore. And then he says, but it's a really bad minhag. Ein nachon minhag ha'na'arim. Number one, they delay the meal when they say, oh, until you give me a good gift. Number one, delays the meal, which as this whole idea is we want to rush through things so that the kids are still up. And then the father has to go searching, he says, into all these places. And then the father has to limalei mashalo libam, he has to promise them whatever they want. He says, and this is the exact opposite of respecting your parents. So he doesn't like it for that reason. So he says, there's nothing wrong with stealing that. It doesn't bother me. But the fact that they don't return it is a big deal. So it's just interesting to see all these sources discussing this. Now we go to the Brisker Rav. He says, Rav Chaim Brisk, Peresh Geder Shmirat Afikoman. Now he adds something else. Each source here adds something interesting, which he says according to what we've assumed until now, is that the whole source for Afikoman comes from our Gemara. That is chotfim matzot in order to get people excited about the afikomen, about the Seder. But he gives a different reason, which is it's reminding us of the achilat haPesach. This is why we can't eat anything after the afikomen. And it has to do with the afikomen and not necessarily as part of this mitzvah of keeping the children awake. And he says the reason why we hide it is because of zecher lePesach, because the korban haPesach needed to be watched and that you couldn't remove your thoughts from it. And therefore, it always needed shmirah. And because of that, we hide the afikomen. So he basically, according to him, this sugya doesn't belong here at all. Okay, the afikomen. Because again, remember, it was only one interpretation of what chotfim matzot were. And the last source we're going to see on this topic is the Mishnah Halachot. And he says, "B'minhag shatinokot gonvim ha'afikoman b'davar shenoagim hatinokot lignov afikoman." He says that's not true. It doesn't teach them to steal. And he says, Minhag Yisrael Kadmonhu, this is an old ancient minhag. It even comes up in the Gemara in Psachim on our daf on Kuftet. And then he says, and anyone who does the Shoshem Kavanah b'derech schok shapir tafi, as long as it's done in good taste, it's all great. So this is interesting. This is, by the way, from someone in our generation, born in Slovakia, 20th century. And he basically says there's absolutely nothing wrong with this minhag. But it's interesting to see the different approaches to the minhag. And then again, a question, does it have to do with this or does it have to do with something else? Is this the explanation of chotfim matzot or is it something different? Okay, we're going to end now with this last line of the Gemara. Amru alav Rabbi Akiva. Mi'amav lo amar higia et la'amod b'beit hamidrash. He never once stopped his shir and said, okay, I'm ending to speak. Everybody has to go home. חוץ מערבי פסחים בערב יום הכיפורים. בערב פסח בשביל תינוקות כדי שלא ישנו, on ערב Pesach so that the kids would go to sleep, בערב יום הכיפורים כדי שיאכילו את בניהם. Now here comes the big question. What everybody said, does Erev mean the day or does it mean night? Now clearly by Yom Kippur, it means the day because they have to go home and feed their children. on Erev Pesach, they have to Kadesh Lo Yishnu. Now, what does it mean Kadesh Lo Yishnu? So some people think that this means, Rashbam says, Kadesh Yishnu et hatinokot bayom velo balayla. This reminds me when I was growing up. I have very, very vivid memories. I remember we watched once there was like a Batman special on that afternoon. I loved Batman when I was a kid. And we watched that special and my parents said, you can watch it in the afternoon and then you have to go to sleep. And it was always torture to have to try to fall asleep. I could never sleep in the afternoon when I was a kid, right? And it was this torture to sleep. And my parents insisted we had to sleep on Pesach, on Erev Pesach. And this is what they say, the fathers have to come home. Now, what's interesting is Tosfot says, that's ridiculous. Why do you need the fathers to come home? The mothers can do it, right? Or Erev Yom Kippurim also. What, the mothers can't feed the children? It's very funny, especially in their day. The mothers generally did. They were in charge of all this, which is what pushes Tosfot to understand this a little differently. The second option the Rashbam brings is Shemagvin ad halayla la'achar sheich yishenim hatinokot. The idea is he wanted to end the shir early so that they got home in order to start the Seder early or start the Seder on time, right? If they got home late, then they wouldn't be able to start the Seder on time. And we want to make sure that this meal the kids are still up for, as opposed to, let's say, maybe a regular Shabbat. So Tosfot comes in and Tosfot says, he says, I don't think that Rabbeinu Shmuel has the right text. He says, V'lo nihira. He says, first of all, like we said, they can't go to sleep without their fathers. And the second thing, if you're worried about them going to sleep and you want them to come home at night before it's too late, then they don't have to come home early during the day. Again, it should be at nighttime more so. So he changes the girsa, and this is answers to some people's questions who said, what is it? Erev, is it Laila? He says, it should say the night of Pesach. And then, now why the night? Why aren't they always home at night? So now he proves in the Gemara in Beitza that, okay, this is classic Tosfot. We'll take from another Gemara and that will give us proof for what we're trying to prove here, which is, there's a great story about Shimon HaTimni, Shalo Baba Lele Yom Tov, the Beit HaMidrash. He didn't come the night of Yom Tov to the Beit Midrash. The Machar Matzah Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, and he starts to say, where were you last night? Why didn't you come to Shir? So what do you see here? That they used to go to the Beit Midrash on Leilei Yom Tov. And now it's telling you they didn't go. What Rabbi Akiva is saying is he ended early so that they didn't go to the Beit Midrash, so that they didn't learn on Erev Pesach, on Pesach night. So because of that, first of all, it's very interesting to think. It's very hard to take this Tosfot seriously because yes, I could see maybe on other holidays they were learning at night, but Pesach Seder night, I mean, wasn't everybody home on Seder night? And it's not only for the children. The truth is also Yom Kippur. It's not only for the children. They themselves have to eat, not to mention it's a mitzvah we saw, right? It's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. So anyway, this Gemara is a little bit confusing. What exactly is going on here? Again, different interpretations. This is classic in Gemara. It's not 100% clear what they're talking about. And what we've basically seen today is a number of braytot that seem very straightforward and easy, but what you learned is they're not so straightforward and easy. And each one has different explanations of what exactly it means, what's going on here. And again, you get to see what they did in their day, today, so that the kids ask and get involved. And we, nowadays, what we do is we keep the customs that we had then, although not all of them. We don't steal the bread from the kids and don't let them eat it. We don't steal we don't do all of these customs, but some of them still remain. And in addition, we each have our own methods for how we keep the kids engaged and how we get them excited about what goes on in the Seder. Because as we know, again, I didn't discuss this because it goes without saying, this is just a central part of the Seder night, which is to teach and pass on to your children. So we mentioned a little in the beginning, but that is the idea of passing it on and having your children understand the story and being active members. And just to remind you, we saw in the beginning this split between some who viewed it as just they're obligated to be here just like everybody else, and others who saw it as they are kind of like the women, they are central. They are critical to us being able to tell the story. That's the whole idea of Seder night. And therefore they become central characters and we have to do whatever we can to keep them awake. That's it for tonight. I'm open to questions now.